Off talking about we were talking about puberty. We finished puberty, and I'm going to talk about the aftermath of puberty and pubescent women, right? So what happens exactly? Okay, so after puberty, you're gonna start having your period, right? Monthly, you're gonna have a 28-day cycle of your period. Happens monthly. Usually, it happens monthly. I mean, there are some exceptions where women who will have delayed periods, and it might give the false impression that the woman might be pregnant, but really it's not. Some women will deviate a little bit from this average. Uh, Same thing, they might also have an earlier uh, period, earlier. The start of the cycle might happen a little bit earlier too, right? It differs between women. But this is the average. And I mean, luckily, we still have a few men in class, but most of you guys are, are women in the class, girls. So a lot of you will be well acquainted with this. So, well, anyways, we're gonna be talking more about it, like, what's physiologically, what's exactly happening to you, right, in these different days, right, these different time periods within this cycle. Okay, so after puberty and into the 20-day cycle, the first 5 days you can have the menstruation period. Okay, on day 14 is going to be the ovulation period. Now, the ovulation period, guys, I mean, someone should know this. What's the ovulation period refer to? What's the ovulation period important for? Yes. Yep. There we go. Ovulation is the optimal time for pregnancies to occur. Now, Carolina was very discreet in saying optimal time. This means that you don't necessarily need to be in this exact time point. You can still get pregnant a little bit after ovulation, right? It's still possible. It could happen. But usually ovulation is you're at the peak. The women's physiology is at the peak of getting if you have sexual intercourse, this is the time. Okay. Anyways, uh, let's see here. All right. So now fertilization, and by the way, guys, all these different sections of the cycle you need to memorize. Okay. I'm just telling you right now, right off the bat. Okay. You need to memorize how long the day cycle is. It's 20 days long about. Okay. Menstruation period is about the first 5 days. Okay. Ovulation on day 14. Okay. And this is when fertilization of the egg of the ovum will usually occur. Okay. Now, fertilization as a secondary oocyte travels to the two-thirds of the fallopian tube. Okay. And proliferation of the endometrium. Okay. So there's going to be a second estrogen peak maximum on day 21. The premenstrual syndrome will be day 27 to day 28. Okay, so this is kind of like a summary. Okay, I know this is kind of choppy, this block of text, but basically it's summarizing very briefly all of the different things that happens during the 20-day cycle. Okay, so during day 14, for example, you're going to have ovulation as well as fertilization of a secondary oocyte. You're going to have on day 21, then you will have the second estrogen peak maximum on day 21. And on days 27 to 28, you're going to have start premenstrual syndrome, meaning that you might have some bleeding, right? You're going to start feeling your second period to occur, okay? Or second, the next period to occur, okay? Uh, what else to say? So this now estrogen here is going to play a huge role. Obviously, your hormone levels will increase during um, your period. You have some hormonal imbalance. That's why women tend to get moody during their menstruation cycle, right? Uh, you know, they get hungry. They'll be craving maybe some sweets or whatever that woman desires. It doesn't necessarily need to be sweets, okay? Like some women maybe desire some more salty food, for example. Okay. Uh, that's basically it for this particular slide. Does that make sense to everyone? Yeah. I don't think I'm gonna go into detail on this particular slide. It's pretty straightforward. Okay, so again, female reproductive cycle, it's on average 28 days long. It's your menstruation cycle, right? It's controlled by several hormones, right? And it's the same set of hormones. The only difference is the actual steroid hormone, okay? So steroid hormone in males. What's the primary steroid hormone that we're seeing as a male? Testosterone, right? And the steroidal hormone for females is going to be estrogen, right? And it's going to be estradiol, okay? Now, hormones are so the other hormones are going to be the same thing. So we're going to have the hypothalamus is still going to be secreting gonadotropic releasing hormone, okay? Same thing in a male, right? The hypothalamus, the hormone it's going to be using to control the pituitary gland is going to be GnRH, okay? Gonadotropic releasing hormone. And the gonadotropic releasing hormone is going to allow luteinizing hormone and follicular stimulating hormone to be secreted outside of the anterior pituitary. Okay, so adenohypophyses. Okay, and we already know what LH and FSH do. Okay, then once it varies, you're gonna have estrogen being secreted, exposed to estrogen levels. Okay, and of course it stimulates gonad. So in estrogen, what it does also, it's gonna be kind of in a it's sort of like a sorry, excuse me. It's sort of like a positive feedback loop in a sense, but you're gonna have estrogen basically stimulating releasing hormone from hypothalamus. So the estrogen itself is going to go ahead. So increased estrogen levels during this 20-day cycle is going to go back towards the anterior to the hypothalamus and increase secretion of gonadotropic releasing hormone. Okay, it'll secrete it as well as synthesize it. So you're going to increase the amount of it that's coming from the hypothalamus towards the anterior pituitary. Okay, so let me just go through that quickly. So let's see over here. Come on. Okay. So you have elevated estrogen levels, and the estrogen, what's going to do is it's going to go back to the hypothalamus, and it's going to tell the hypothalamus, hey, it's time to make some gonadotropic releasing hormone. Hypothalamus makes it, and then the gonadotropic releasing hormone then is going to go back down to the anterior pituitary and start allowing for the secretion of LH and FSH. Okay, and then these two hormones together are going to push forward, the maturation of gametes as well as the period, like the ovulation of your secondary oocyte. Okay, so this will then be divided into the ovarian cycle. So the ovarian cycle itself is divided into 3 phases. Okay, and the actual uterine, the menstrual cycle, is divided into 4 phases. So there's gonna be two different things going on. Okay, you're gonna have the ovarian cycle itself, and then the uterine cycle. The uterine cycle is referring to the menstrual cycle. Okay, we're gonna go over those right now. First, oh wait, before that, we're gonna go over actually a quick anatomy of. This is gonna be review. Okay, the only things I want you guys to know are the ones I circled in a red box. Okay, so of course you want to know. I mean, you should know most of these, but the only things I want you guys to know, of course, are the uterus, urinary bladder, uterine tube, ovary, cervix of the uterus, which is going to be as you enter through the vaginal canal, right? When you enter the vagina, you go a little bit upward. You can enter the cervix of the uterus. Okay, so right over here, cervix, and over here is the vagina. All right, so it's right as you enter. Okay, that's all you need to know. I'm not going to really test you on. Honestly, I don't even think I'm going to ask you maybe one question on this. Likely not. This is from last semester. All right. This I might ask because I'm doing the same thing for the semi-first tubules on the male section of this chapter. So I think it's just fair that I'll also ask something from here as well when I give a cross section. So I want you to be able to understand that this here, when you look at this cross section under a microscope, okay, we're looking at the egg, okay, we're looking at towards where the fallopian tube is, okay, where the ovaries are, okay. Just look at it, be able to understand this how this looks different from the seminiferous tubule. I might give you a like a true or false question or something. Is this a is this from a female or from a male, right? Or something like that. Something pretty not complicated, but something kind of simple, all right? Because you should know a little bit of histology. Some histology background is appropriate for you guys, I think. Just a little bit, not too much. You're gonna probably learn more about it as you go into the as you actually go into nursing. Uh, anyways, okay. So, like I said before, where is it here? So let's go from start from the beginning over here, okay? So over here, we have the primordial follicle, okay? So this is basically an immature oocyte, okay? Immature oocyte, all right? It develops into an oocyte, okay? And it's called the primary follicle, okay? The primordial follicles are the precursor to the oocyte, okay? It happens before it, all right? And the oocyte then will become a secondary follicle known as granulosa cell, okay? The oocyte is gonna be enveloped inside of it, okay? It's like a shield around it, so to speak, kind of a bubble, okay? Then this granulosa cell is going to mature into a mature follicle, okay? And then the oocyte is still inside of it, okay? All right. And then what this does is it's going to allow for this structure to transport the oocyte outside. It becomes an ovulated oocyte. Once it becomes an ovulated oocyte, it then will allow the women to conceive. Okay, it's going to travel outward. Okay, and you'll see more about this in a second. Is it clear on that? This is kind of like how it differentiates itself. Okay, like if I say oocyte on its own, it's not. I say ovulated oocyte, there's a big difference. Okay, you guys, right? When I mean ovulated over oocyte versus just a normal oocyte that's still inside of the area. So ovulated means it'll escape out or out to the corona. Yeah, one sure. So the ovulated oocyte well, it's fully ready. Exactly. It's a complete it's a shipped out. It's been delivered outside already. Okay, and this happens during the 20-day cycle. Okay, on day 14. So this will here will correlate to approximately day 14 of your cycle. Okay, of the 28-day cycle. But before that, it starts off as a primordial follicle. Okay, then the primary follicle becomes the oocyte, which is known as the primary follicle. Then the primary follicle develops into a secondary follicle, which envelopes the oocyte inside of it. Then the second follicle gets transformed into a mature follicle, which contains the antrum and the oocyte inside of it. The oocyte itself now is ready, okay, but then it needs to be shipped out, so to speak, outside. All right, so it has to be shipped out, and then once it gets shipped out, it becomes ovulated. All right, that's when this is when the woman's ready to potentially get pregnant. Okay, and I'll show you this more here. I'll show you the actual maturation process right now. Okay, and we're gonna have the same picture as the previous chapter, the previous section for male. Okay, and instead of it being called spermatogenesis, this process is called oogenesis. Okay, now this is a big difference between women and female. And with boys, you don't see this happening until puberty completely. But with women, okay, this process actually begins at birth, but then freezes until the girl enters puberty, and then this whole thing starts over again. Okay, so at birth, you're gonna have a primary oocyte, and that's gonna be arrested in meiosis one. Okay, and most people know this that a girl a woman in their lifetime isn't able to make any more primary oocytes. They make a predetermined amount of it at birth, okay? And that's what they stick with for the rest of their life, all right? That's why responsibility, responsibility, I play the blame game, right? Usually women uh, are to blame when it comes to infertility. They tend to because women are more limited. in that sense, physiologically speaking. You know, depends on the women. Some women are they're at birth they don't make that many primary oocytes. Others make more. I mean, that's why you see some women, they're able to have many more children than others, right? I mean, you see those crazy shows that, and I'm not talking about economic reasons. I'm just talking in general, right? A woman who has sexual intercourse at the same frequency as another woman is not necessarily going to have uh, the same amount of children, right? It's because of this. The fertility of a woman is different. And this has to do with their how many primary oocytes do they have, right? So it could be arrested meiosis number one. And then remember, meiosis one, it's still going to be diploid, okay? They're still diploid, okay? You can actually see over here, right? It's still diploid, okay? It has a pair of chromosomes from mom and dad, okay? So that's the primary oocyte, okay? Then at puberty, you're gonna start making secondary oocytes, okay? And the secondary oocyte then will be arrested in meiosis two, okay? And then the only time the secondary oocyte will then further mature, okay, is all during the 20-day cycle. Okay, so a certain amount of eggs or whatever. I shouldn't say. You're gonna have a certain amount of eggs every month that they're gonna be ovulating. Okay, and that only happens once a month, right? So, but the rest of the secondary oocytes are going to be oh, I'm sorry, the primary oocytes, okay, that become the secondary oocytes, they're going to be kind of in reserve, kind of like think about the military, right? They're in reserve, the soldiers are in reserve. But in the case, instead of having soldiers, you're going to have your secondary oocytes that kind of stick around there, arrested, and only a few of them actually proceed with the rest of meiosis too when you have the 28-day cycle. Okay, that's why. I mean, if that was the case, if the women uh, matured every single one of their oocytes in one shot, then women have a limited amount of oocytes. Okay, if you do that, then the woman will never potentially would never be able to give birth. Okay, they won't be able to get to conceive and give birth because they won't have any more eggs. Okay, so what happens? What exactly happens during when you start from primary oocyte and all the way down to an egg, right? So there's going to be a big difference they're going to notice. So guys, do you remember a single spermatocyte? How many sperms does a single germ cell give you? Sperm cells you end up with per primary spermatocyte. Four, right? Is that something with women in terms of eggs? Yes or no? Right. You're gonna have something called polar bodies that occur. Now, polar bodies are basically dead cells. They're useless cells. They do nothing. Okay. All right. And over here, you can see it disintegrate. Okay, they just kind of go away. All right. So that's from the primary oocyte. So a primary oocyte, as it undergoes the first meiotic division, okay, in meiosis, you're gonna have one secondary oocyte that's gonna become the egg, okay, and then you're gonna have a polar body, okay, the first polar body, all right. Then afterwards, like during ovulation, during ovulation, okay, you're gonna undergo the second meiotic division, okay. And what happened over here is going to have now the formation of a haploid cell, okay? Remember, the secondary oocyte over here at this point, when I'm drawing the arrow, is still diploid, okay? But once it undergoes second meiotic division, you're going to have over here, all right? It's going to become then a haploid cell, okay? And this will be over here, all right? Now, actually, when it actually divides, by the way, when you have the second meiotic division, you will form another polar body, okay? Another polar body will be formed, okay? It's called secondary polar body. Next, let me actually do this here. Let me zoom in a little bit. Zoom in over here. Let me just do this here. So it's easy for you guys to see, okay? So your 28-day cycle, okay? what's going to happen is secondary oocyte, the egg, is going to release from the ovary ovulation. Okay, and that was the picture I showed you in the previous slide. Okay, the actual oocyte is going to be released. Okay, during ovulation, right, from the ovary. So what there's going to be two fates. Okay, there's two fates from this egg. Okay, it's going to first of all, it could either become unfertilized. Okay, so an unfertilized egg will be passed out of the body. So that's why when I said before, if our women is able, 20-day cycle, ovulate every single one of their secondary oocytes, you don't keep it, right? Every period you guys have, whatever eggs you're ovulating, you lose them if you don't fertilize them, right? You just lose them. It passes out of the body, okay, out of your uterus. Now, if the other fate is, okay, it can undergo fertilization. So if you're having sexual intercourse with significant other, right, then there's going to be a union between the egg itself and a sperm cell. Now, if you look very closely here, okay, guys, you see this little circle here? That's a the second polar body, okay? Once fertilization occurs, this second polar body actually separates from the egg, okay? So it separates from the egg and disintegrates, okay? And then the actual egg itself then is going to go ahead and fertilize to form a zygote with the sperm cell, okay? And at this point, guys, okay, the two gametes here, the two sex cells, they're both haploid, okay? That means 23 chromosomes, okay? And over here is going to be a very key thing here. This is a key, and it's what Carolina answered. She said no, okay? You don't for fully matured gametes, okay, in a woman. You only make one. One primary oocyte makes one egg, okay? One mature egg is made from this. You lose the other ones in the form of polar bodies, okay? Okay, everyone? So remember, just a little recap. Okay? When you're baby at birth, right? You make a certain amount of primary oocytes, okay? And these are the ones over here, okay? The diploid, okay? Diploid, you still have mom and dad's chromosomes, okay? Then during puberty, you're gonna start making secondary oocytes, okay? So that means that this is gonna undergo the first meiotic division, okay? And you're gonna get a secondary oocyte, which is now gonna become the egg, and you're gonna have your first polar body, which disintegrates, okay? Then every cycle, every 20-day cycle, a secondary oocyte, or a certain amount of them, it could be, I'm not really sure, okay, to be honest, but secondary oocyte then is going to undergo the second meiotic division, okay? During the second meiotic division, the egg is going to, first of all, this here this is too cluttered, okay? The egg is at second meiotic division, and it's going to do two things, right? Well, I, this picture should be nicer. I should actually include it over here, the split, but it's going to undergo second meiotic division, okay? You're going to have the egg itself here, and then the second polar body here. Now, this complex, guys, this complex here have one or two fates. It could either pass out of the body if it's unfertilized, or it's going to undergo fertilization, okay? So this, after you undergo the secondary meiotic division, the egg now being haploid can either fertilize or pass out of the body if it's unfertilized, okay? If it, in both cases, by the way, the second polar body goes away no matter what. You're always going to get rid of that second polar body, okay? Just uh, just to review that, okay? Is everyone clear on this? All right. All right, so let's talk about the 20-day report. Okay. Now, we have two different cycles. It's divided into two portions, okay? You need to remember, and this is going to be a good source of a lot of questions, really source of a lot of questions on an exam. Quiz, potentially that in the quiz. Now, next week, not this week, is exam. Next week, I'm going to give you a quiz. So you're gonna have the ovarian cycle that happens in the ovaries, and then you're gonna have the menstrual cycle that actually happens in the uterus. Okay, and these two together happens within the 28-day reproductive cycle. Okay, the top graph, the top chart over here is gonna correlate with your ovarian cycle. Okay, and the bottom chart is gonna correlate with your menstrual cycle. Okay, and what exactly happens. All right. So first, look at only at the ovarian cycle, which is gonna be the top portion. All right. The follicular phase, which is going to be days, the first 2 weeks approximately. Okay, the follicular phase is all the days before ovulation. Okay, so what happens is you have the Graafian follicle develop, meaning that your follicles are going to develop into a mature follicle over time. Okay, so from days 1 to 13, the follicle is going to fully develop, and then once it fully develops, remember you're going to have your oocyte inside of it, if you remember from the previous picture that I showed you. So this little red dot here, if you see this little red dot inside of the follicle, that's your oocyte. That's going to be your secondary oocyte. All right? Now, or you can just call it an egg, okay? If you call it an egg, it's synonymous with it, all right? Now, egg, day 13, between day 13 and 14, okay, the secondary oocyte will leave the ovary. And so that means it's going to be leaving the mature follicle, all right? And this happens on day 14 approximately, is the ovulation day, okay? So this is the day when the actual leaves the ovary, all right? And actually, let me take a step back quickly and show you that again. So right over here in this picture again, okay? Like I said before, this is on day 14. If you see this where I'm circling right now, this happens in day 14, all right? But the first 13 days, you're going to have the maturation of the follicle. You're first going to start with a primary follicle. Primary follicle becomes a secondary follicle. Secondary follicle becomes the mature follicle. And then the mature follicle then is going to eventually travel the member of your, okay? And then once the egg is there, it's going to actually come out of the ovary, all right? And this is going to ovulate out of the ovary, right? So that's what it means, ovulated, okay? So come out of there, and then that's going to be day 14, and that's when optimal time for conception will occur, okay? Anyways, talking about, all right? Then, all right, so that's ovulation, okay? So that's when the egg leaves the ovary, all right? Then we have something called the luteal phase, which is going to be the remainder of the cycle. So it's day 15 to 28. And remember, day 28 is going to be the premenstrual syndrome. So this is the end of it. All right. It becomes corpus luteum and produces progesterone and estrogen. Okay, so you're going to be producing progesterone and estrogen, two hormones. All right. So in the terms of what's happening in the actual ovaries, like what's actually occurring, okay? The follicles are going to become a mature follicle. You're going to have ovulation. And the follicle itself, whatever remains of the follicle, when I'm circling right now, is going to become the corpus luteum. And the corpus is going to produce more estrogen, progesterone, okay? And then after that, you're going to have the formation of new follicles at the premenstrual syndrome portion, right? Right before you enter the next 28-day cycle, all right? Now, the other thing I want you to look at the ovarian cycle is the amount of the gonadotropin hormones you're secreting during this time period. So the first 14 days, your follicular stimulating hormone, it's gonna be kind of high, right? Now, the reason why it's kind of high, especially on the first week over here, is because you want to develop that mature follicle. That means this you're pushing for the maturation of the gamete, meaning the maturation of the oocyte. Okay. At this point, like I told, and Drew asked this question earlier, so it's becoming a mature oocyte. I'm like, yeah, once it exits, it's ready. Okay, it's ready to go. And it's going to be reflective with the FSH. Okay, because remember, FSH is going to have to do a lot with that. Okay, and now you have luteinizing hormone. Luteinizing hormone is going to stay constant in the first 13 days. There's no change in levels of luteinizing hormone. All right. However, something happens on day 14 with both FSH and LH. You're going to see a huge spike in both of these hormones on day 14 because now you're ovulating. Okay. So that's going to be the peak. All right. That's peak. Okay. Peak then, your luteinizing hormone then will be reduced down, go kind of down to base level from before. And it always maintains a very similar level throughout the 28-day cycle. The only big difference you see is on day 14, okay? When you have a huge amount of estrogen being secreted, okay? Because that's what luteinizing hormone does. You're gonna push for more production, more secretion of steroidal hormones, okay? For male, it will be testosterone, okay? For females, estrogen, all right? And of course, after the ovulating phase, the follicular stimulating hormone will also then be reduced, all right? The levels of that will be reduced back to baseline level, okay? And it'll kind of maintain that until you re-enter the follicular phase, right? The beginning of the follicular phase, which is going to be over here. So this over here, we're making a little square. This is going to be, you're about to enter the next 28-day cycle, okay? All right. Is everyone with me so far? So remember, okay, I want you to know these. Look at I want you to remember the graph. Look at the menstrual phase, pre-ovulatory phase. Well, actually, don't worry about the pre-ovulatory phase, okay? Don't worry about this one. Don't worry about that one, okay? But know about the luteal phase. I want you to know the premenstrual phase, okay? The premenstrual phase will be day 27, day 28. Premenstrual syndrome, it's day 27, day 28 happens over here, and your body is getting ready to enter the next cycle. Okay. All right. So now let's talk about what happens in the menstrual cycle itself. Okay? Now we're not talking about ovarian cycle. We're talking about the actual menstrual cycle. We're looking at the uterus now. Okay. What's exactly happening in the uterus? All right. And I want you to draw a parallel between luteinizing hormone and follicular stimulating hormone, like the levels it has, okay, and how it's going to be reflective with the menstrual cycle, okay? So the first 5 days, you have menstruation, right? So shedding of the endometrium. So you're gonna start bleeding, right? So over here, like when you start bleeding, it's because of this. You're shedding your endometrium, okay? Now during the phase, it would be day 6 to 13, okay? So day 6 to 13, right? Somewhere over here, 13, okay? You're gonna have the first estrogen peak, okay, to develop the new endometrium. So basically, you're gonna be replacing the one you shed because you're shedding endometrium at the beginning of every cycle, but then you're making more, okay, during the cycle, okay. Now, why does this happen? Well, it happens because you're gonna have an increase of estrogen levels. Now, if you look over here, so you're gonna have a huge spike of estrogen levels as you enter the 13th and 14th day, okay? And that's correlating with increased endometrium, okay? So the endometrium, the increased endometrium is going to be because of increased estrogen. Now, guys, if you correlate this to day 13, 14 to day 13, 14 of your ovarian cycle, do you see how luteinizing hormone has a large on day 13, 14? See that? And do you remember when I told you that luteinizing hormone has a lot to do with secreting a lot of the sex hormones, so testosterone or estrogen? For women, it's estrogen. So correlate that with what's happening in the menstrual cycle. This correlates with one another, okay? The reason why you have such a huge spike of estrogen is because of a huge spike of luteinizing hormone. That happens as a consequence of luteinizing hormone. So the first thing that happens, you have a huge secretion of luteinizing hormone. Then after that, you're going to have a huge secretion of estrogen. Then a huge secretion of estrogen is going to cause the new endometrium to occur, okay, to be produced, okay? Do you see that order of causality? All right, it's really important to put the two dots together, or three dots, I should say, together. All right. Now, so that's the proliferative phase, okay? Then during the secretory phase, okay, secretory phase, you have the second estrogen peak and progesterone, okay? This increased thickness of the endometrium. So you're gonna have the estrogen levels, they're gonna let me actually get rid of this quickly so you can see it. They're gonna drop a little bit, but then it goes back up again, as well as progesterone is gonna go up again. Now, the reason why you're gonna have increase of progesterone and also estrogen is because of the luteal phase that occurs in the ovarian cycle. The corpus luteum production, as well as progesterone and estrogen production, happens as a consequence of the follicle. Okay, when the follicle becomes a corpus luteum, it also produces progesterone and estrogen. This is why you have the second spike here of estrogen. Okay, the second spike of estrogen happens because of the follicle. Okay, during the luteal phase. All right, and this is going to cause thickness of the endometrium. Okay, so during the phase, when the endometrium reaches its peak, so that how thick it is, the thickness of the endometrium is at its maximum during the secretory phase. All right. Anyways, is everyone okay with that? You need to be able to correlate the two cycles together because it makes more sense in that way why it happens. Knowing what happens in the ovarian cycle will explain directly what happens in the menstrual cycle. Okay, whatever happens in the menstrual cycle happens as a consequence of the ovarian cycle. Does that make sense? Okay, so now this part will be the premenstrual cycle, the premenstrual phase, and that's day 27 and 28. Okay, you're gonna have ADH being secreted as well as oxytocin. All right. So guys, if you remember, what does oxytocin do for a woman when they're about to give birth? You need to know this. What does oxytocin do for a woman undergoing labor? It initiates contractions, and it will as a feedback loop to cause even further contractions, right? Yes, super important. If a woman has an issue with oxytocin secretion, then usually they'll need a C-section, cesarean, dissection. All right, that's that. All right. So I mentioned this before. Okay, women don't necessarily need to follow the 20-day cycle, the 20-day cycle to the dot. There might be a little bit of deviation by like 1 or 2 days, typically. Okay, plus or minus 2 day, 1 or 2 days. Okay, uh, but in a normal woman with a cycle that they the phase that is shorter or longer is the follicular phase. So the follicular phase, guys, is the one that's actually going to be influenced with this deviation of that whatever time it is. It could be a couple of days, it could be more, it could be less. Okay. Uh, so, for example, what day does a woman with a 25-day cycle ovulate? So these are the kind of questions you're going to have to think about when I give you an exam, because this is the type of question I would ask in an exam. Okay. So knowing that the only thing that's is your clear phase, and you always know. Okay. So the always be in. Okay. The luteal phase always takes 13 days after ovulation. Okay. After ovulation will be the luteal phase, right? 13 days after. All right. So what day does a 5-day cycle ovulate? Okay. Knowing that the only thing that's going to influence is your follicular phase. And you know the follicular phase is on average 13 days. Does anyone have any idea how to figure it out? Okay, Carolina, how'd you calculate that? So that everyone uh, get an idea. There's a little bit of kind of like algebraic thinking involved here, a little bit, very basic. The key thing you need to know is you need to know that the luteal phase is 13 days long. Yeah, right. No, yeah. There's a, I mean, it's like that's the kind of train of thought you want to look at, right? So if you know that the only thing that's being influenced is your follicular phase, right? Your luteal phase is going to stay the same, okay? And your your ovulate phase will always happen immediately after your follicular phase. And like you said, you could just subtract from the total amount of days, right? You could take the difference, right? You know 20-day is normal, 25 days shorter. So you got to subtract 3 days away from the follicular phase. So follicular phase takes 13 days, so it'll actually be day 11. Okay? So day 11 would be the 10 was close though. I was actually double checking your math because I thought for a second you got it right, and I had to do it again. I had to when I was just talking about it. But yeah, you were close though. It was really close. Okay, uh, because the follicular phase is only 3 days shorter. Okay, so it's 10, 13 days, and then more day on top of that. The next known day will be the ovulation phase. Does everyone get that? The two key things you need to know is the follicular phase is going to be the one either shorter or longer, but the luteal phase itself is always 13 days long. Okay, as long as those two things, you'll always be able to figure out the day of ovulation. Okay, same thing. Like if I give you guys, for example, here's another one, guys. You need to really know this. All right, let's say a woman you're monitoring a woman, right? Her uterus, okay, and also her ovaries. You're just monitoring it, right? In a clinic, and you figured out that her that she was ovulating after 12 days. Okay, on day 12, she's ovulating. How long was her follicular phase? Yeah, yeah. So Carolina, if it happens on the 12th day, her ovulation, then it's 11 days long. Yeah. Uh, so you only subtract for the follicular. You either okay. You can actually add more to the follicular. So, for example, if I said, um, uh, let's say, you could also add. It's the only one that's going to be either longer or shorter. You could also add to it. I'm not going to give another example because we're out of time. But you could just think to yourself, oh, maybe she has. So maybe ovulation occurs on the 15th day instead of the 14th. Okay. If it happens on the 15th day instead of the 14th, that means that the follicular phase is a day long. Make sense? This is like probably the most complicated part, relatively speaking, of the whole entire unit, but it's still pretty. Okay. Does everyone get this?